Rebirth Island is here, and Season 3 brought about some very interesting changes in terms of the meta of Warzone and what you can use in Rebirth Island that will dominate the map. Now, this is not going to be your Uncle Bob's 55th meta video about the 3 weapons you definitely should be using, although we will touch on some. This is going to be talking about some of the underlying meta shifts that are going to make you a better player. There are equipment changes, things you need to think about on the perks front, and if you manage to ace all of these, you're going to have a far better experience on Rebirth Island, dealing with teams, dealing with stackers, or playing the ranked experience. The first big thing that we have to talk about is perks, because in Rebirth Island, the perk system, I think, is fundamentally different. Rebirth Island is about having the smallest amount of time to try and pull off things like reloading and plating, which are the biggest things that will get you killed in this game. And for that reason, I think 2 perks here are essential, with a third perk being fairly important too. I think you absolutely have to run either Quick Fix or Tempered. I know you can find Tempered Vests, but it's not the same as always having it, and in my experience, Tempered is a surefire way of guaranteeing you more success in gunfights because you get more armor in with every single plate. Full plating to 2 plates is also a substantially shorter animation than 3, which means you can re-engage and win more fights. Quick Fix is an alternative if you're somebody who wants to gamble your luck at finding a Tempered Vest, and I honestly feel that EOD is huge in Rebirth Island. The number of kill streaks in this mode that are explosive, and the number of changes to the explosives meta, which we're going to touch on, are absolutely substantial, and it's something that I think everybody should be using. Not to mention that EOD players can survive an entire Semtex grenade stick, which is kind of important these days, even though Semtexes have been nerfed. Moving on to lethals. This is the biggest switch up for the Rebirth Island setup. Season 3 has brought in a ton of changes, and C4 should now be top of your list. C4 can now be thrown similarly to how it could be in the original Warzone, which is a very far distance, and a C4 can now one-shot a fully plated, fully healthed opponent. If you throw C4 onto somebody and detonate quickly, it is a guaranteed down or kill, or even a squad wipe if they're camped in one room. I have no doubt in my mind that they are going to revert these C4 changes because they are genuinely that outrageously OP, so make sure you check it out. I think it's something that's destined to be removed, so use it while you can. On the flip side of that, I honestly don't think you should pay too much attention to throwable lethals this year. Thermite grenades are probably the most useful now, given the nerfs to grenades and Semtexes, and there is an argument for the thermobaric grenade given its recent buffs, but I honestly think the best lethal grenades are now the Claymores and Bouncing Bettys. Now, these technically got buffed with a minor range nerf, but for the most part, these are super powerful. And in the context of Rebirth Island, I think the Bouncing Bettys are the most effective, because they give you a higher window and ability to block up of halfway and try and get a plate or try and get reloaded. Everything in Rebirth Island in terms of how you die normally comes down to you trying to put plates in or trying to reload. While some of the throwable lethals, like the thermite for example, can be super effective in some scenarios, I think having a Bouncing Betty that you can quickly toss on the ground whilst plating is a very cool thing to have at the moment, and something that is going to save you a lot. I would highly recommend the Bouncing Betty, but if you're somebody who wants to stick with more traditional lethals, I think the Thermite is a really solid option. The Thermite is a guaranteed down if you stick somebody in these close quarters environments, and whilst we don't have a guaranteed down with Semtex grenades anymore, and we don't have a guaranteed down with throwing knives anymore, this is the viable alternative. It is a little bit slower than the others, but I do think it's the most effective. I think the most effective players in this game are going to use a combination of Tempered and Quick Fix, with Bouncing Bettys as an option within their loadout to create more windows for them to heal. Whether you decide to use Tempered or Quick Fix and then introduce the third lethal variety that gives you more windows to move away from opponents, it's going to give you that option of maneuverability that you didn't have before. Rebirth Island is about creating those 10, 15, 20-second gaps for you to get away, reload, and play as much as possible, and keep yourself in a relatively safe space. Final circles on Rebirth Island tend to be super chaotic as well, so having the ability to heal faster and having the ability to offer yourself some third security, like a Pie or a Bouncing Betty, is a huge asset to have going into those final zones. Now it's time for us to talk weaponry. And yes, this is a traditional, oh my god, he's talking about meta gun situation. But I think the meta for Rebirth Island is actually a little bit fundamentally different to traditional metas. And the reason for that is because, in my view, magazine capacity is king and speed is king. Now, at the moment, this is going to surprise you, the two weapons that I think are the best on Rebirth Island are not the weapons you would anticipate and don't fall under any logical category. Right now, in my view, the two best weapons are the TAC Evolver 7.62 with the 100-round magazine, not the 50-round magazine, which does make you more mobile, and the second is actually, believe it or not, the Renetti with the full auto conversion kit, which is an aftermarket part. Now, these two are super dominant, and the reason for it is quite clear. The TAC Evolver at 7.62 is probably the hardest hitting long-range weapon to medium-range weapon in the game right now, even better than the Subverter. And I'm somebody who uses the Subverter and has been for the last season or so. In my view at the moment, the TAC Evolver, whilst we don't have data on the changes, is hitting harder with 7.62 rounds than the SOA Subverter, and it's also more accurate. As for the Renetti with the full auto conversion kit, the thing is absolutely monstrous, and if you can factor in a little bit of trigger discipline, the Renetti is capable of taking down an entire squad of 3 in a single magazine. You're more likely to get 2 opponents before you need to reload, but with a tiny bit of trigger discipline and a little bit of accuracy, you can genuinely make that thing fly, and it is outrageously OP. Also, if you haven't leveled up the Renetti to maximum level yet, you can actually go into a Warzone private match, put any attachments you want on it, save it as a custom blueprint, and then go back into regular Warzone, and you will have all of those attachments on that blueprint, even if the gun isn't max leveled. This appears to be a bit of a bug right now, but it's entirely usable, and you can level up your Renetti naturally whilst having all of the attachments. And the next logical 2 weapons from that are the SOA Subverter and the HRM9. Now, the Subverter, in my view, is not as powerful as the TAC Evolver, but it does have a few more mobility benefits and is a still fairly heavy-hitting weapon. The HRM9 or HMR9, I forget which way the order is at this point, the bloody hammer, everybody knows what I'm talking about, is without doubt, unified, the best SMG in the game. There's no way around it. It is extremely overpowered. The HRM or hammer or whatever you want to call it has the same damage model pretty much across the entirety of the legs, arms, torso, and head, meaning that this thing basically, as long as you hit the opponent, should die fairly quickly. It's extremely OP. I have absolutely no idea why they didn't nerf or change this thing going into Season 3, and it's going to be dominant at close range. The Renetti still outkills it at closer ranges, but past maybe say 10 or 12 meters, you'll find that the HRM or the hammer or the HMR, whatever the hell it's called at this point, I simply don't care, will end up doing more damage on the long run. If you use a combination of the perks I have recommended, the weapons I have recommended, and also the lethals I have recommended, you will reach maximum effectiveness in Rebirth Island. It's all about creating gaps as a player. It's all about creating those moments for you to have reload opportunities and plating opportunities, and having high capacity magazine weapons as well that reduce the amount of times you need to reload and allow you to be more effective. Hopefully you found this video useful, folks. If you did, drop a like, drop a subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next one.